Welcome, brother, to another presentation. We're going to go ahead and discuss the title of our presentation, which is UPA 7 of leader Eric Edstrom's false home-based storehouse theology. The reason why we're going to do this presentation is because it seems like an opportunity now has presented itself for UPA 7 to take advantage, unfortunately, of the strife and difficulties that Mountaindale has had with the truth, with proclaiming the new codes, unfortunately. And so we want to set it straight that the brethren will know whether, because of these troubles with some of these associations today, they can safely go over to UPA 7 and support them, be a part of their home-based storehouse theology, and so forth. So we want to make sure that they have a clear conception of the snares, the entanglements that they will get themselves into based on the message and its counsel. So we've prayed, we ask that you do the same, claim the promise of John 16:13, and he shall guide us into all truth. Let us begin. All right, so the questions addressed in this study are, why is this tithe issue so important? Number 2, are we now in the scattering period? Number 3, what does the Bible history show about organized gospel work and tithe collection? 4, what does the spirit prophecy say about tithe collection? 5, what does the rod say about home storehouses and tithes? 6, what does UPA or teach about home storehouses and the collection of tithe? So each of these questions we're going to carefully look at and get to the bottom of. All right, why is this tithe issue so important? Well, we know that the angels will be instructed to cut down the unfaithful servants, those that have not returned their tithes, those that have kept their money against God's purposes, the way he set up his storehouses, the way he set up his work to be handled. And this is a sad thing, brethren, if we're caught on the wrong side of this tithe issue. And also in the second quote, we see that tithe paying is called an essential subject, and you can find that track 10, page 20. The rod clearly says that the tithe paying is something that calls us to do a duty to practice this truth. And so when it teaches stuff it causes us to practice something, that's very important, as we see here in that quote. All right, so one of the basic lessons we learn when we come into the message is Zechariah 4. And with this beautiful pictorial representation, we see that these two pipes right here, as we know, are the final two messengers to our church since 1844. In fact, that can be found in 5 selected messages, number 15, page 3, where it says that they are the only two mediums since 1844 to interpret the scriptures. So this is very, very powerful, this symbolism here and what the rod talks about in this symbolism. So this is a very good counsel. It is imperative, therefore, that every present truth believer teach and practice only present truth. That is, teach nothing more or less than what is published. Do nothing more or less than what the message calls for. So it's very important that we teach what the prophets interpreted. If they didn't interpret a certain way, we don't teach it. We have to go by what the prophet published. Otherwise, it's going to be what's called a head bowl instead of a golden bowl. All right, so let's take a look at where this scattering period comes from. How does UPA 7, Eric Edstrom, its leader, come to this idea that we're in a scattering period? We want to show you this so you get a good idea where they're coming from.
So the idea of scattering the publishing around the world is a solid concept, clearly found in the golden bowl. And this will be the case up until Ezekiel 9. We do not have a shepherd over us, or man-appointed porters, prophets, or so forth. That's what causes all the confusion. But we can go forth as the hands of Zerubbabel, Elijah's helpers, as self-supporting laymen, Bible workers. We don't need permission from any executive council or any porter, prophet, president. We have the marching orders in the rod. So that will exist up until Ezekiel 9, and then we'll enter into the latter kingdom period, where God will reestablish a theocracy. Brother Hadaf will resume his work once again as the one shepherd, the under-shepherd under Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So the scattering period is a way to understand this section of history from the death of Brother Hadaf up to Ezekiel 9. So the idea.
All right, so you heard that he lays out that since Brother Hadaf passed away in 1955, you notice that blue area. Well, he calls that the scattering period, which means a combination of scattering the message, and because Brother Hadaf died, everything kind of scattered. Well, let's look what the rod says. Not what a man with a breath in his nostril says, but what does the rod say? Well, you find Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 241, as the first reference, and then you find the second reference on 1TG number 18, page 17. Now, you'll take a good look at these references, brethren, because the rod places that Zechariah 13:7 only in the context of Jesus and his crucifixion. We never, throughout the whole rod message, do we find an application of anything else. So what we see is head bowl private interpretation of placing Zechariah 13:7 in a place that it doesn't belong. It never says anything about that it applies after the death of the prophet Elijah to Ezekiel 9. This is all something that's made up, and it's put there to support UPA private program of home storehouse tithe collection systems. So very, very important. All right, so what this it really is a conniving sophistry. Yes, we are in a publishing scatter period and have been since the prophet established Old Mount Carmel. But to label Zechariah 13:7 as a second application, which means Brother Hadaf died and the sheep are scattered, as UPA has done, is to use one's own head bowl instead of the golden bowl. A sophistry of twisting a text to justify tithe collecting home storehouses. The message has absolutely nothing to say about a second application of Zechariah 13:7, and so should we. All right, so let's go on to our next question. What does the Bible history show about organized gospel work and tithe collection? We have a very powerful reference here, track 4, page 63 and 64. We'll pause so you can read this one. Okay, so let's focus in on this general principle, and it's the beginning of the Christian church. So let's see how the Lord instructed the people to take care of the tithes and what to do with it. We notice that many were possessors of lands or houses, and they sold them and brought the prices of the things that were sold and laid them into their own home to produce their own literature and their own message to promote the Lord? No, brethren, laid them down at the apostles' feet. So we see a system where God announces that he has leaders. He has the corporate, the very first corporate organizational concept, where the people brought the money to them and they used their judgment to dish out what was needed at that time. So we see a system here that was set up from the very beginning. And the key point is organized leadership, where God's appointed storehouses were the of tithes, not individuals who self-supported themselves worthy of tithes. So this is a very key beginning setup. All right, Spirit Prophecy comments on that. We'll pause and you can read it. Okay, so here we see again the Spirit Prophecy supporting the idea that officers gave careful consideration to individuals' needs as well as to the general financial interest of the church. So again, we see the principle that the people were not keeping their tithes and doing what they thought best to spread the message. No, they were instructed to give it to individuals, the leaders that the Lord had appointed. So we see this clearly at the very beginning of our Christian history. And this would go on all the way to this very day. The Lord has not delegated a change in plans, unlike UPA tries to put over on us. All right, so the next question is, what does Spirit Prophecy say about tithe collection? We'll pause. You can read these. Okay, so we highlighted a couple areas. God will see all those that do the wrong thing in tithes. So remember that we cannot look at this situation lightly and misstep. We cannot follow a man whose breath is in the nostrils. We have to do a thus saith the Lord plan with our tithes. It's very, very important. Now, look at this last reference here. They are not to use it for themselves in an emergency, nor to apply it as they see fit. Now look at this. Even in what they may regard as the Lord's work. This is what UPA 7 is trying to tell us. Go do the Lord's work. Keep the tithes. The Lord will be with you. What a Satan trick, brethren. Be careful. This is why we want to put this presentation on today. Expose the works of the devil. All right, what does the rod say about home storehouses and tithes? Here we have the great reference that clears the matter for many of us. Unfortunately, some are blind and look at it and try to explain it away. But no, brother, we can't do that. We'll pause. You can read this. So we see once again that the Lord in his infinite wisdom knew that this would be an issue. So he had the prophet address this question that a brother who was led of the Lord put in and submitted to the office, the Mount Carmel office. Is it scriptural for one to retain and personally use his tithe and offerings in order to carry on the gospel work in his own community according to his own plans? So in other words, he wants to be a self-worker, self-supporting worker for the gospel work. He wants to do good. But what does the rod say? Nowhere in the scriptures do we find permission to use the Lord's money at what? Our own discretion. So in other words, the Lord has a plan. We're not to use our own ways and thinkings and plans and setups. We're to go by the Lord's plan, and that is to return it to his storehouse, not to our own home and use it for our own purposes. All right, so now we're going to get to the crux of the matter. What does UPA org teach about home storehouses and collection of tithes? All right, so we got to point out something very important for some of you that aren't aware, particularly you followers of UPA 7, and that is that UPA 7 and Edstrom have changed like a chameleon the teachings of this storehouse theology. Take a look at this. This is May, June of 2011. Now, you can read the rest of this quote at leisure, but look how he identifies a proper storehouse. Having an executive council, publishing free literature, holding sessions, issuing certificates of fellowship cards, etc. Now, what was he talking about? He was talking about the Salem organization with Don Adair. He said that that was a proper storehouse. So what changed? You know what? This is how the enemy works. He gets people changing for their selfish, greedish ways. This UPA 7 has now changed their teaching, and now they condemn any storehouse that has an executive council, and they no longer call it a proper storehouse. Amazing, brethren. Here's another quote to back up their thinking, and this was taken from the scattering time, and you can find that at the 30-minute mark, 15-second to 40-second. In Southern California, there was a call to reorganization, and from 1961 to 70, God had a storehouse here. So again, he calls it a storehouse, and he knows very well that they had executive councils and sessions and cards and so forth. So again, he supports the idea back then. But now let's look at the current teaching that UPA 7 does to show you the chameleon changing, as it were. All right, this is UPA Edstrom. So yes, you can start a storehouse, and if you publish the original Shepherd's Rod, then you are qualified to accept tithes. So move forward, break free from man-made justifications. You can find that on Mark 57-minute mark, 43-second to 57-second of his video, Davidian Storehouses versus Headquarters, History and Present Applicability. Note, it is now taught that a proper storehouse needs an executive council no more. So where does he get this from? Nothing but head bowl teaching, brethren. And we're going to give you some more proof of this. All right, so I want you to hear the...
So yes, you can start a storehouse. And if you publish the original Shepherd's Rod, then you're qualified to accept tithe. So move forward. Break free from man-made justification.
All right, so you heard yourself that Edstrom claims on that video that you can collect tithes and you are qualified to collect tithes if you publish the work from your home. All right, so let's look at a summary of this so that we can be aware of what's going on. Moreover, as sure as the devil lives, he will employ every possible agency to either add to God's word or subtract from it, aggravating and disheartening, especially capitalizing on the misfortunes and afflictions of the saints. Look at there, capitalizing on misfortunes. He has taken advantage of Mountaindale's troubles and the subsequent pre-11th hour ministry movement to capitalize on that, brethren. Don't miss this. UPA is stepping in there like a Barnum and Bailey circus performer, and trying to do magic tricks to switch people into this home-based tithe collection theology. Don't fall for it. To thus secure their downfall if possible. Principally, he will depend upon two of his most powerful and successful agencies, extremisms, one pushing to the right and another to the left, in an effort to scatter as many as possible away from the center path of light. He will endeavor to drive one class into the fires of fanaticism and plunge another class into the icy waters of unconcern. To do this end, he will seek to convince the former class that their afflictions and misfortunes are evident results of imperfect obedience to present truth, and will mock the latter class as fanatically strict in their course of faith. Okay, now this is the key why we put this in the summary. The only ones that will endure to the end will be those who carefully watch their steps from being carried away, either by additions to or by subtractions from the work of inspiration. So what we see here with UPA 7's home-based tithe collecting theology is nothing but an addition, a complete addition, head bowl addition to the rod. And we really counsel people, don't get snared in this trick. You will be found as an unfaithful servant when the angels go through the church. So we plead with everybody to wake up and don't be falling for this snare that the evil one has put to these workers. So thank you once again for listening to us, and we hope we've shared some light on this theology. It's very, very uninspired. It's very, very against the rod message, and we don't want you to be slain when the angels go through the church, Ezekiel 9. So thank you again. Until next time, may the Lord be with you. Amen.